Hello and welcome to the first episode of Fantasy Fights. I'm your host, the Connor Penguin, and today we'll have our first round of the series. I've put 50 names from fantasy books into a randomizer and then sprinkled in a few sci-fi characters as well. And the first two that came out were not the two that we'll be fighting today. The first two that came out were Loch Lamora versus Randall Thor. Yeah. I thought it best to start off with something a bit more fair, so the second spin brought us Arlan Bales versus Harry Dresden. Please be sure to like and subscribe to watch the next episode of Fantasy Fights, and this video will contain spoilers for the Demon Cycle and the Dresden Files up to Book 17. Arlan Bales of Tibbet's Brook, aka the Painted Man, the Part Chin, the Deliverer, is the hero who rediscovered the fighting wards and brought the fight against the demons who hunted humanity close to extinction. After being robbed and betrayed by his friend, he tattooed these wards onto his skin so that he'll never be defenseless and weaponless again. Over time, the wards and the demon meat that he consumed began to change his body into something capable of wielding the demon's own magic, making him into a nearly unstoppable hunter and one of humanity's last hopes. Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden, aka the Tsar Lord, the Warden of Demonreach, the Winter Knight, is a private investigator by trade and a wizard skilled in a vast range of destructive and subtle magic. Trained to be a wizard from a young age and granted additional power by the Fae, archangels, and a vast array of artifacts, Harry has more power at his command than most wizards hundreds of years older than he is. Arlan doesn't have much in the ways of equipment. He keeps an array of warded weapons on his horse, Twilight Dancer, spears, knives, arrows, axes, though he himself very rarely uses these, preferring to strip down to a loincloth to expose as many of his wards as possible, then battle demons with his bare hands. Though he once held a heavily enchanted cloak, he went out of his way to never use this during the series, so it won't be counted here. In terms of magical gear, Harry is loaded for bear whenever he steps outside the house. He has a wizard staff carved with runes, a blasting rod to allow him to more easily channel fire, he wears a shield bracelet capable of nullifying any kinetic or elemental force rings to allow him to launch powerful concussive blasts, and his leather coat is heavily enchanted to provide massive levels of protection. In addition to these, he also usually carries a handgun and a silver pentacle amulet for focusing certain spells. Harry also has access to a treasure trove of other powerful items, including the Holy Grail, blessed swords, a coin containing the power of a fallen angel, and a vast assortment of various potions. There's no real contest here. The ridiculous amount of items, both magical and otherwise, that Dresden has at his command, compared to the array of handheld weapons that Arlan keeps on his horse, Harry takes the equipment round hands down. Arlan was trained in Sharusak, the creation style of hand-to-hand combat by their drill masters, and then trained further with Arman Jadir, the greatest master of the art. Once he warded his skin, he further developed his skill to fight 10-foot-tall demons with his bare hands. Holding magic inside of his body has given him massively augmented strength, speed, and stamina. He can run at speeds of 40 miles an hour for an entire day without sweating or breathing heavily, and can casually toy with 2 master assassins without using a drop of external magic. Harry's major talent in close quarters fighting is his ability to take a beating. The man can take some damage. Combine this with his Winter Knight's ability to shrug off pain makes him a battle tank in combat. He has increased strength and stamina granted to him from the Fae, and he is trained in using his staff as an offensive and defensive tool. Harry's abilities in combat put him on par with any normal human opponent, and even some supernatural bad guys would think twice before tangling with him. But Arlan Bales is in a different league altogether. The Winter Mantle takes Harry to the upper limits of what a human being is capable of, but Arlan has trained himself to be a living weapon, and his natural state can only be described as superhuman. The martial round goes to Arlan. In addition to the wards tattooed on his skin, and the magical lift to his physical abilities, Arlan can use wards to create a multitude of other effects. He can throw fire and lightning by drawing wards in the air. He can turn himself to mist, allowing anything solid to pass through him, and when he reforms, any injuries he has taken are fully healed. He can activate wards of unsight, making him almost impossible to locate, and he can draw on ambient magic in the air around him to replenish any of his own reserves. He can use his misting abilities to fly, and can see as well at night as others can during the day. The range of Harry's magical abilities can only be guessed at. With enough time and preparation, he could move a mountain or blast it to pieces. Harry's skills lie in thaumaturgy, alchemy, and evocation. While thaumaturgy is arguably what he's best at, tracking spells, disrupting other casters, establishing links to people and places, for the purposes of this video, we'll focus on evocation, quick and dirty magic to blow up everything Harry wants blown up. He can call astonishing amounts of fire, ice, and wind in battle, even more so after becoming the Winter Knight. He can also use soul fire, a magic referred to as the fire of creation, granted to him by an archangel, in order to supercharge his magic at the cost of burning away parts of his soul, and also the wizard's sight, the third eye that opens his mind to the truth of the world around him. This one is a little tricky. Almost all of Arlan's magic is geared towards fighting and killing, making him a truly destructive force in any conflict. But he is new to the magic, and it is stolen from demons, not a true part of him. Dresden's magic, however, is so versatile and powerful that there are very few circumstances in which he does not have a power that would come in useful. Both have powerful will and are battle-hardened in using magic, but I feel like Dresden's flexibility lets him take the lead in Arlan in overall magical abilities. There are so many ways to set this battle to give one or the other a distinct advantage, so I'll keep it as simple as possible. The two are facing each other from 50 feet away on an open field. There is ambient magic in the air for Arlan to call on, and it is night time to allow him to use his full range of powers. Harry has come prepared for a fight with the following gear: enchanted coat, wizard staff, blasting rod, shield bracelet, force rings, silver pentacle, and a .44 revolver. Arlan is wearing a loincloth and carrying a spear. Neither of the two can call upon any of their allies, or we will be here for hours. In order to give reason for the two to not stop fighting, we'll add a slight tweak to Arlan's backstory, and set it in his world. In this version, Arlan never brought Renna out of Tibbet's Brook, and thus never regained his humanity. He's still magic drunk and desperate to kill as many demons as possible. Let us say, for expediency's sake, that Harry said something inappropriate and doubled down on it with something unforgivable. Arlan was not in a playful mood, and with the careless stride of a man who wrestles demons to while away the nights, he starts to close the distance between himself and the strangely dressed asshole. Harry has so far been attacked by everything he'd encountered in this land, and his patience had long since worn away. Still, this creature looks mostly human. He unslings his blasting rod and, taking careful aim, fires a warning jet of fire inches over the man's head. Arlan stops walking, mistaking the rod for a demon bone wand. This man didn't look Crazian, but only their priestesses knew the workings of such magic. Dropping into a fighting crouch, he slowly starts circling his opponent, waiting for them to take a Sharusak pose. Harry recognizes the dangerous posture of his enemy, but has never been one for getting in too close when it wasn't necessary. What is the point of being a wizard otherwise? Readjusting his grip and his aim, Harry points the rod directly at the center of the man's chest. He was about to utter a pair of Spanish syllables to unleash a gout of fire, when faster than humanly possible, the painted man closes the distance and slams the tip of his spear into the wizard's chest. At least Arlan would have, had symbols on the wizard's coat and mantle not flared to life, stopping the blade partway into the lever. Arlan barely had time to catch a glimpse of the unfamiliar wards before the man's staff was pointed his way and an arctic wind lifted him off his feet and sent him tumbling head over tail away across the field. Harry's heart was pounding as he readjusted the grip on his staff. He was done underestimating this creature. Whatever he was, no mortal could have moved so fast. Harry watched it as it quickly regained its feet. He contemplated launching more fire from his blasting rod, but quickly stowed it away. He wanted both hands on the staff if the 4th grade art project closed the distance on him again. He could just make out the figure drawing something in the air with his hands, when a blast of fire twice the size of the one he'd cast came hurtling his way. Harry launched himself to the side to avoid the fire, and as he rolled himself to his feet, the creature had again closed the distance and was thrusting with his spear straight for Harry's face. He quickly spun his staff up to parry the attack, batting it aside at the last possible instance. Before he could even think of a launching attack of its own, the spear thrust out twice more, both times impacting the impenetrable leather of his coat. Harry quickly gathered his will together and with a cry of "Infriga!" launched another blizzard at his opponent. Arlan was ready for the gale this time and planted his feet firmly on the ground. When it hit, he quickly drew a siphoning ward in the air to absorb the magic, but it had no effect. He rocked back a bit but held his footing. The man in the leather coat was slowly backing away, staff extended in his direction. Arlan couldn't blame him for trying to gain ground, but it wouldn't do him any good. He quickly drew a heat ward to offset the cold in the air and waited for it to end. Once Harry had backed away 30 feet, he let the spell die and returned his staff to a fighting grip. He'd expected to turn the guy into an ice sculpture, but he hadn't even had the decency to get goosebumps. The demon immediately started closing the distance that Harry had gained, drawing doodles in the air to send more higher, hurtling across the field. Harry quickly threw up his shield bracelet and let the blasts impact harmlessly against it. He couldn't let this continue or the creature would wear him down. When Captain Loincloth was less than 10 feet away, Harry let his staff fall into the crook of his arm and drew his revolver. He fired 1, 2, 3 shots. The first shot buried itself deep in the man's chest. The second ploughed directly through his shoulder, causing him to drop the spear. And the third shot passed through the cloud of mist that had been the demon seconds before. Harry watched stunned as the cloud reformed into the shape of the creature he was fighting, no bullet holes in sight. "Huh," was all Harry managed to say, before the monster closed the gap. Arlan threw a series of punches at the wizard's head. Without time to restow the strange metallic weapon, he dropped it and the staff to the ground, ducking under Arlan's blows. In a flash, the man's hands coated over in a sheet of ice, and the haymaker he sent Arlan's way came faster than he was used to from Dayfolk, though still too slow to catch him by surprise. Arlan launched a kick hard enough to split a tree at the wizard's chest, but the coat's wards flared dimly and rebuffed him, and as Arlan staggered off balance, the icy punches sent his way in return connected with his chin. Blood spilt onto the grassy floor, but Arlan wouldn't let him capitalize. He feinted for the man's head and then sent a flurry of punches into the coat. He sidestepped the return swing and let loose another kick. The wards on the coat were a pale flicker now, and the grunt that escaped the lanky bastard was music to Arlan's ears. He quickly sucked in a deep breath and absorbed the nearby ambient magic, causing his own wards to flare briefly. It was almost safe to go for a grab. Harry snarled at the impact and sank deeper into the heart of the winter mantle. The power wanted him to tear the creature apart with his bare hands, but it was too fast, too precise with its strikes. All Harry had was raw strength, with only a pale shadow of the creature's speed and precision. So he desperately launched another haymaker at the monster's jaw. He turned to mist again, and Harry staggered forward off balance. He stumbled 2 steps when the creature reformed with one arm under Harry's shoulder and the other around his neck in a submission hold. Arlan began to crush his opponent's throat. The wizard pushed and pulled for purchase, but he had no leverage. Still, his efforts prevented Arlan from snapping the neck outright. Arlan bore down with all of his might on the man and watched as his struggles got weaker and weaker. No wards of the coat flared to life to save him. All the wizard did was twist to weakly tap his fist to Arlan's chest, a fist covered in silver rings. A wave of force more powerful than the wind from before blasted Arlan 10, 20, 30 feet in the air, knocking the breath from his lungs and sending him crashing to the ground half the field away. He struggled to his feet and saw the tricky bastard still panting on his knees. With more concentration and struggle than he was used to, Arlan brought the wards of Unsight to bear, and fed some of them his remaining power. Harry got his breathing under control and struggled to his feet. He spun around looking for where the creature had come down, but he couldn't find him anywhere. Harry had been so close to blacking out that he wasn't even sure which direction it had been blasted in. Harry could have almost believed that it had fled, if it wasn't for the feeling at the back of his neck. His fine-tuned battle instincts told him that the fight wasn't yet over, and every second that passed caused his anxiety to creep higher and higher. He spun around searching, and let the winter mantle fall away. He thought through what to do next. With a quick evocation, he brought his staff spinning back into his hand. Next, he slipped his silver pentacle up over his head and held it by its strap. Slowly and deliberately, Harry wiped the icy blood on his knuckles over the pentacle and formed a quick and simple tracking spell. The pentacle suddenly and sharply shot out to the side, dangling from its strap, as though gravity told only the silver symbol that down was by the creature's fallen spear. Harry snapped his head around in that direction and, seeing nothing, opened himself up to the sight. Suddenly he saw the world around him as it truly was. He saw the flickering wisps of ambient magic in the air. He saw the creatures brimming with power far off in the trees, wisely staying away from the two combatants. And he saw the broken, shattered remains of a once good man. A man who had become twisted and tainted by demonic magic. And what little humanity was left to him hated what he had become. A man who had picked up the spear and was aiming to throw it directly at Harry's head. Harry left nothing to chance. He pointed his staff to the sky and with a cry of "Fuego! Pyro Fuego!" brought a column of white-hot fire crashing down on the demon. The spear disintegrated before it left his hand, and Harry watched through the sight as the magic in the creature's system rushed to heal the body from within, as externally it burned away. An instant later, the floating wisps of magic in the air began streaming into the painted man, causing his magic to burn brighter. Harry needed more power. Keeping his mind far from winter, Harry pointed his staff at the inferno and shouted "Ventrus Cyclus!" feeling his left hand go numb. A whirlwind infused with soul fire whipped up around the demon's feet, lifting him off the ground and far from the vapors of magic sustaining him. The winds merged with the wizard's fire, and the two formed into a flaming tempest with the demonic man at its heart. It burned and beat at him, and Harry did nothing to dispel his work. He heard neither scream nor shout from Arlan Bales, and when the last embers of fire flickered away on the charred and blackened landscape, Harry Dresden was the only one left alive. Thank you so much for watching and listening to the first episode of Fantasy Fights. I'm going to be getting most of our matches from a randomizer, but comment down below if there's anyone you would like to see fight. Also, leave a comment on how you think today's fight went. I was very surprised as I wrote this as to how well paired these two were, and that the fight could really have gone either way. I had so much fun with this, and already have the characters ready for next fight, which I'm writing at the moment. Hit the subscribe button down below so you don't miss it, and check out the other videos on my channel. Have a lovely rest of your day.